Hi guys, it's F. Gardner. I was looking through my the comments in some of my videos, and I saw one comment asking me, "Hey F. Gardner, what are your thoughts on Terry Davis?" Yeah, I know who that is, and I have my thoughts. So yeah, I thought that'd be an interesting thing to talk about, or topic, person to talk about. Yeah, so if you don't know who Terry Davis was, he was like back in like the 90s, he was like a like genius computer programmer, and I'm not sure what computer companies he worked for, but yeah, he was like a super genius computer programmer, and it's said that he developed like schizophrenia later on, and his life, it ended like tragically. I think he was struck by a train. He had become like homeless for a while, and like it was like a few years ago. It was like 5 years ago or something like that. I remember hearing on the news that he died. He got struck by a train. But anyway, so like in his younger years, like in the 90s, he was this like brilliant computer programmer, and he eventually developed something called TempleOS. That stands for Temple Operating System. So like an operating system like Windows or Macintosh, like Apple. So like it was his own operating system. And yeah, I don't know anything about coding. I didn't major in computer science or anything like that. So that all just kind of seems like magic to me. But from my understanding, that's like really impressive that like he developed his own operating system from scratch. Like I've never heard of that being done before. I don't know if it has. Maybe he's like the only guy who's ever done that. So he developed TempleOS, and he wanted to try to communicate with God through the operating system. So I don't know if that's like through like a chat bot, like AI, or however that would work. I'm not sure. I've heard different theories on that. I've heard it debated if are AIs, are they really just demons, or is it life forms? And I guess they are life forms. They're life in a different manner. So yeah, AI seems very mysterious to me. And Terry Davis, he wanted to try to communicate to God. I believe he was a Christian, a Catholic, and he wanted to try to communicate to God through his operating system. That was his goal, his understanding, and like he thought of his like it was like the new like Solomon's temple, or something like that. Like he hence the name, like TempleOS, Temple Operating System. He wanted to communicate to God and ask him questions, and I remember reading online various questions. He asked like, "What's God's favorite video game?" And I think the response he got was Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong's a really good game, so I guess that kind of makes sense, honestly. But yeah, and he had a number of quotes. Like I remember reading or hearing somewhere that Terry Davis, he said that the meaning of life is to entertain Mr. God, like to entertain God, and like good things happen to you if you're entertaining God. And I'm a different religion than he was. I'm a Buddhist. Like how I've made videos before, how I'm a Buddhist flat earther, and how I elaborate on my views. But a lot of what he says it like it makes sense. So like in Buddhism, we have like nirvana. There's also like gods, like plural, but that's more in the sense of like what most people think of as like angels. The devas, as they're usually referred to as in Buddhism, these higher beings, these higher life forms above humans. So like, I don't know if it would necessarily be like entertaining a particular deva, but yeah, the idea of entertaining Mr. God, as Terry Davis put it. So like nirvana, like in Buddhism, like enlightenment, and that's not like anthropomorphized, like thought of like a human figure, like whereas like maybe some people when they talk about God, they would think of him as like the heavenly father, or a figure like that. But it's this higher, I guess you could say, state, but even saying state's not totally accurate. It's just indescribable, like nirvana, enlightenment. And I have my thoughts on what that could mean, like entertaining Mr. God, as Terry Davis phrased it. So like Buddhism and Hinduism too, there's like certain things you can do to reach enlightenment. So, more than just a few things, many things. But sometimes it requires like doing something unusual or extraordinary. So like meditation for like days straight, just for example. And that kind of makes me think of like how I had a video before talking about like Buddhism, how it's like the Matrix, like this is artificial and you need to escape. Well, like I'm aware from my understanding, like computer programmers, like how some people will say like, oh, maybe we live in a simulation. Well, like if a simulation would be like a computer program or whatever, and like if there's computer software or a video game and it's being tested like before it's out, the people will test it for glitches and see if they could do something that can break the system, the software or game, whatever it is. So they'll do like unusual things, like maybe leave the game on for days straight. And that makes me think, oh, that's kind of like how you'd have a Buddhist monk meditating for days or even longer straight. So like doing unusual things like that you're not supposed to do to break the system and get out of the system, get to nirvana or leave the matrix. So maybe that's what like Terry Davis's understanding, entertaining Mr. God, as he put it, that it just makes me think from like a Buddhist perspective, what would that mean? And yeah, like what I'm saying, it makes sense to me as a Buddhist that it's like there are things you can do, like you get in certain like meditative trances, states, and that it's things that require doing something unusual or that most humans wouldn't do. And it's like glitching out of the matrix, glitching out of the system. Like samsara, that's the term that would be used in Buddhism for this illusory, fake existence, which I guess would be like when they talk about it being a simulation, like that kind of thing. So, yeah, and what Terry Davis is saying, entertaining Mr. God, well, that would be likely by doing things that are extraordinary, whether that be good deeds or whatever, just having an interesting, entertaining life. So things that are unusual, it's like that break the system similarly, and you get out of it, get to nirvana or heaven or however you want to put it. So I see a lot of overlap there with what he's saying and the way I'm thinking. And I know people will say, oh, well, Terry Davis, he was a schizophrenic, and so maybe he was just like, this is his mental illness talking, he's delusional or whatever. Like, I'm not saying anything to try to downplay mental illness necessarily. Not trying to say that, of course not. But like, I've heard some people say that like schizophrenia, though, maybe it's being misunderstood. Like you have the idea of like the mad monk and all sorts of religions, and Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, all across the board, where it's like they gain enlightenment or this different state of mind, or they have these blessings, graces that normal people don't. They've achieved this state that most people don't reach, and they're misunderstood as just being insane. So that's like where the idea of a mad monk like would have came from historically. So then thinking about Terry Davis, he was like a highly intelligent man, since he was this genius computer programmer and everything. So maybe he was a very spiritual person too. So maybe he achieved this mad monk status, this level of thinking, and like, I'm not saying he was outright enlightened, no, but like maybe he reached this level of awareness, because like in Buddhism, there's different levels of enlightenment, and I'm not even necessarily saying he did that, but I don't know. I'm open to the idea, and it makes sense to me. Like what I see, like it seems like there's like a correlation here, like or connection, like the mad monk stories you would hear from a long time ago, and then you hear somebody like this who's thought of as eccentric or schizophrenic, whatever, but they're a highly spiritual person and intelligent, and yeah, maybe they're misunderstanding some things, as they're just mistaking it as, oh, it's just mental illness, or oh, it's just schizophrenia or whatever, something like that, where maybe he did achieve this like higher level of their state of mind. Yeah, it's fascinating to think about. And what he said, like, you know, the whole entertaining Mr. God being the purpose of life, I could see that in Buddhism, in the sense of how I described, like doing things that you're not supposed to do, in the same way, like if you're playing a video game that's before it comes out, or testing computer software, doing things you're not supposed to do to see if you can cause some kind of glitch and like overheat or break the system. And it's like, because that's kind of what like getting to nirvana is. It's like you need to like specific things, meditate, and days on end could be, and it's like things that most normal people aren't doing, and you get to this higher level of awareness, and maybe it could bring you, while you're still here in this illusory world existence, like certain whatever, what could be perceived as graces or blessings, or however you want to phrase that. So I think, Terry Davis is just his understanding, and I'm not saying that like as if he's right or he's wrong and I'm right. I don't mean it like that, but like it's just like different people interpreting the same thing differently, but they're fundamentally trying to describe the same thing. So that's what it makes sense to me. Terry Davis seemed like he led a very interesting life, and it's tragic that he was hit by a train. But he, in his regard, he was a genius, a computer genius and everything. So I thought, this. It's an interesting thing to talk about and think about some of the things he said. It just makes you think. It makes F. Gardner think a lot of what he talked about. I have in one of my books. I have a couple of my characters, and the title of one of my horror novels is "Call of F. Gardner." In that book, part of it, I have some characters discuss Terry Davis, like their thoughts on him, because I have known about Terry Davis for a long time, and in that book I have the the villains, and much of my title is the Ouroboros. They're this evil organization. They have these computers hooked up, and they're trying to. I don't want to spoil a lot of what happens in my book, but just very briefly, just kind of the premise. Yeah, they have these like supercomputers, and they're like trying to mess with reality. And I try to incorporate some of my knowledge about like the Mandela effect when people talk about that, which is kind of like glitch in the matrix type stuff, like things in reality that seem off and changing. And I had in the novel Call of F. Gardner, I have the characters discussing Terry Davis, how he tried to make a computer to the operating system for computers, TempleOS, to try to communicate with God. And I have the characters in it. They're wondering, would it be possible for someone to try to make the opposite of that, like to communicate a computer that can communicate with like the devil? So I have like characters, they're wondering about that, and they're talking about some of the philosophy Terry Davis would talk about in the context of the novel I wrote in Call of F. Gardner. So yeah, there's a good question for my thoughts on Terry Davis. So yeah, just off the top of my head, yeah, those would be F. Gardner's thoughts on Terry Davis. Yeah, he sounds like he led a fascinating life, and it's too bad that he died tragically. But anyway, yeah, he was a genius for computers and everything like that. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Yeah, I enjoyed talking about this topic. It's a very thought-provoking subject. The life of Terry Davis in general, and some of the stuff he talked about. Okay, well, catch everybody later. Bye.